Right, we have our panelist, of course, here to also chime in on this particular development from Uhuru Kenyatta and the judiciary as well, of course, raising accusatory fingers. Allow me to introduce to you this morning Professor Anyang' Nyong'o, who is a senator from Kisumu, also Dr. Shema Chodho, who's the global leader of Kenya Diaspora Alliance. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Right, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Seeing this particular development right now, it seems also President Uhuru Kenyatta is frustrated by the judiciary, according to what we've just heard this morning, speaking with much acidity that we can see. What will be your comment on that, Professor Anyang' Nyong'o?
I think it's rather unfortunate. President Uhuru Kenyatta's frustration should not be percolated into tirade against the judiciary. I think if I were President Uhuru Kenyatta, I would have asked our lawyers to look into the issue and find out whether the Chief Justice and his team made a decision that was contrary to law and contrary to evidence. I don't know exactly what exists in the Constitution in the event that the Supreme Court makes such a decision, but unfortunately I think the Supreme Court's decision is final under our jurisdiction. And I think rather than enter into tirade against the Supreme Court, the same Supreme Court which awarded them the presidency several years ago, when the Prime Minister himself didn't really agree with the statement, but he made his statement civilly and accepted the ruling of the Supreme Court. I think it behooves President Uhuru Kenyatta as head of state to tread rather carefully between his role as Jubilee's candidate for the presidency and head of state. Because as head of state, he is head of everything. And he's also sworn to uphold the Constitution. Once you swear to uphold the Constitution, it means that when a decision is made by a government body constitutionally, you are duty-bound to abide by it. So I think it is the height of incitement for the president to engage in a tirade and for his deputy president to engage in an excessive tirade against the Supreme Court. At this point in time, as we go towards the election, we should all be very, very careful about what we say. As Jesus Christ said, it was what comes out of our mouth that is lethal. What goes in may not be as lethal. So I do believe that the president will consider his statement. He will come out with another statement to assure the public that that was an unfortunate incident, and that if indeed is dissatisfied with the ruling of the Supreme Court, there's no other way but to abide by the Constitution.
Right. Dr. Shema Chodho.
Debal, allow me on behalf of the Kenya Diaspora Alliance and diaspora generally to send condolences to the family of Kaiseri and join Kenyans in mourning his demise. It was very unfortunate. On the matter at hand, the sanctity and fidelity of the law and observing the separation of powers between the executive and the judiciary is not anything that we should be seen to go against. In this particular regard, I want to stand with the Honorable Chief Justice. And I respect his reaffirmation that he doesn't and wouldn't want to interfere with his judges. Even though he's the president of the Supreme Court, all the judges have got independence. So to that extent, it's unfortunate to see it like the executive is trying to impose a matter on the judiciary. But having said that, it's important also to recognize that we have a constitutional crisis staring at us on the face. I do know there was the major ruling on Friday by the High Court in terms of ballot printing. Without going into the details of it, what I keep asking myself is, did the court truly look at the implications in terms of the strict timelines that we have? But again, I'm not an expert in that domain, but I am concerned that unless we find a speedy resolution to this matter, and I'm hoping that when the presidential candidates meet today, that they'll put partisan interest aside, and for the benefit of moving Kenya forward, knowing very well that the date 8th of August is immovable. You know, in the previous sessions, the ball, in 2007, and even earlier years, it would not be possible that a constitution could be changed by parliament, 2/3 majority, and then you change an election date. But we are aware that with the 2010 election, the date is one of those protected sections that we have to go to a referendum to change. And a referendum requires a period of time, 90 days, which we don't have. So we are staring at a crisis, and I am hoping that the leadership will be able to find political will so that we get a solution to this matter.
All right. Before you go further, I'm really sorry. I should have really done what my colleague Shem has done. Yes, I think we're all really sad to have lost my friend CS Joseph Nkaiseri. Joseph was my deputy when I was Secretary General of the ODM, and we worked together very well for several years. He remained my friend. I remember I was in his office not too long ago when I took a friend there to get help from the CS. He was always very cordial, very jovial. Notwithstanding his role as a CS and quite often locking horns to the opposition, he never made it personal. Never at any time. And I remember any time I went into the office, he would call me my boss, remembering those old days. So I was really saddened, and I issued a statement from Kisumu to the press, both for the TV and the written press, expressing my deep condolences to the family. Having said that, I think the circumstances under which we lost the CS need to be properly ventilated by authorized persons and competent persons, so that the nation can be reassured of the causes of death, and the family can also be assured of what happened so suddenly to our friend, leader, and comrade, CS Joe Nkaiseri.
Right, thank you. Right, and of course we want to also give this chance to Alice Wahome and also Honorable Jeremiah Kioni to express also their deepest sympathy and condolences to the late Honorable Joseph Nkaiseri, and also to chime in on this particular story of the judiciary and the executive now that you're raising accusatory fingers. Let's start with you, Alice Wahome.
I think it is in order, Dibal, that I also take this opportunity to give my sincere condolences to the family, the widow, the family, entire family, the Ima community, and Kenyans at large, and of course the security sector, where I have had the privilege to oversight during this term in Parliament. Honorable Nkaiseri, the CS, was the Minister for Interior, and many times I had the opportunity to interact closely with him during the committee sessions. He was prompt, very polite in his responses, and he made detailed reports and answers to the committee as required. Of course, even in Parliament, as a colleague, we do want to say that it's a big blow to the family and Kenyans at large. On the question of the judiciary, you asked that one, and maybe the responses, the reactions that are coming from different sections of Kenyans. As a lawyer, I think myself, I would say that I am stunned by a decision coming from the courts at this particular time, because I think the entire country is prepared, is ready for the vote. The voters are ready for the vote in August. And it is a very difficult time for anybody to think that they would want to bring other factors that can make the already complicated situation that we are in even more precarious. I think reprinting of ballots, retendering, doesn't put the country general elections, the presidential, in a very good state. But I want to believe that we shall make it, because we we must have the elections in August. I think the judiciary, I have said before, and as a lawyer, and there is a very major principle that it does not deliver judgments in a vacuum. Meaning that economic, political, social, and prevailing circumstances must also inform the kind of judgment that is delivered. And saying that doesn't mean undermining the authority of the judiciary. So for me, this is the point. I want to see this judgment as another impediment, another block being laid before the general elections to block the ballot. It is not possible for a judgment to be given within the same tender. You isolate one specific item of the tender, the ballot for the presidency. If the tender was wrong, then the entire tender is wrong, because we have isolated one particular ballot so and said the rest can proceed.
So you think there is a dark underbelly to this?
There is a dark cloud behind the judgment.
I think
there is, yes, and you know, we have reached a situation where it is okay to actually give an objective critique of a judgment without undermining the authority of the judiciary.
Same Professor Anyang', we have a rebuttal to that particular statement.
Because you see, let's not forget that in the past, when the president was in charge under the old constitution, or declaring where the elections are, the president could prorogue parliament a month before the election. I remember there was a time when the campaign period was only 3 weeks, and then you go to the elections. So in terms of time for printing ballot papers, it is within the history of Kenya that ballot papers can be printed in a month. Secondly, when the judiciary made the decision on the ballot papers, I think they looked at practicality of printing ballot papers, and they looked at where the controversy really was. So I think to that extent, Alice is contradicting her own statement when she was saying that judgments should be made in consideration of political and circumstantial situations. Obviously, that's where the judiciary said, look, if we postpone this thing for even an MCA, it doesn't make sense, you see. Let's look at where the issue really is. And thirdly, I really think that we should be very careful to make such a statement. Maybe a year from today, in another circumstance, if the judiciary makes a statement and Alice comes back in a situation where she thinks the thing favors her and says the judiciary should not have looked at the political circumstance, then you become very... I think what I said earlier, no, I think what we needed to do is justice according to law, and judicial justice. Justice according to law, as far as I learned law in the old days, is strictly adhering to the law and the constitution to make a decision. Judicial justice is another issue. Whether what we're doing is just or not, okay? Because the concept of justice is very wide. In this circumstance, there are aggrieved parties to the tender. You ask yourself, do these aggrieved parties have reason to be aggrieved? That is the thing that was before the Supreme Court. Do they have reason to be aggrieved? Then look at the circumstances under which this tender was issued. And both sides must argue the case before the Supreme Court. The people who think it was done procedurally without any kind of Mickey Mouse game, and those who think it was done procedurally without any Mickey Mouse game. Then upon Alice as a lawyer to come before us and say, well, when I look at arguments on both sides, then I find that the decision that the Supreme Court made was neither in line with law, nor was it just. Right. But to make broad statement, no, hold on, let me finish. Let me just finish. Let me finish.
Because you couldn't wait for me to finish.
Okay. Why don't you let me finish?
One of the arguments.
Why don't you let me finish?
Okay, let him finish, then we'll come to you,
that I
Alice.
should intervene before you go very far.
But you see, don't fear me going far.
I'm not fearing, you are misleading.
All right, just let him finish, then you continue.
Not the judge of all.
I mean, you are misleading Kenyans.
No,
all right, Alice, just give it.
You're not the one who can lead Kenyans.
All right.
But you said I'm
just a moment, Alice.
You're
yourself.
misinforming Kenyans. Because
Yeah, I mean, you're not an authority in respect of this particular issue.
I am an authority.
All right, Alice, just a moment.
You're not an authority.
Alice, let him just finish. Prof, just finish your point, then we'll come to Alice.
Yes.
Yeah. You see, I did study constitutional law and judicial justice, so you can't say that I'm not authority. I'm more senior to you in learning than anything else. But anyway, the point is that you really must look at what was before the Supreme Court.
Yes.
And whether indeed those arguments were not properly disposed of before the Supreme Court. And what was the basis of the Supreme Court decision. So just making broad statement that they must make decisions based on political, economic, and social ground. Of course, that goes without saying. But what were the arguments before the Supreme Court?
All right, thank you, Alice. You have your moment right now before we come to a shame.
Yeah,
and of course,
we
hear from.
You know what I
Jeremiah.
was intervening about is the fact that the prevailing argument or the argument that led to this particular judgment was that there was no public participation. And he has said that there should have been some public participation in this tender. And you see the tender was single sourcing. And I think the question of 1 month is sufficient. That's what I was trying to intervene for printing of the ballot. If the reason by the judges was that there was no public participation, then in this particular tender, then there will still not be sufficient public participation. And part of public participation is actually tendering and putting it to the public and inviting quotations and participation by anybody who would want to actually apply for that particular tender. So for me, then the judgment defeats the objective or the purpose.
But how can word the tender and single sourcing hang together?
The law allows, in special circumstances, yes, for direct tendering, yes.
All right.
It does.
Yes.
And I believe even now that's what they would do, because an ordinary tender should actually take 90 days.
All right. So essentially here, the issue that we're talking about, let's hear from, first of all, from Jeremiah Kioni, give you opportunity as well to express your sincere sympathy and also deep condolences to the family of the late Joseph Kaiseri. Then you proceed with this particular also discussion that we're having this morning.
Thank you. Thank you, Debar. I want also to take this opportunity to convey my condolences to the late Kaiseri. We worked with him during 10th Parliament. Very level-headed person. I know we had quite a bit to do with him when I had a special committee, parliamentary committee on the illegal gangs. And it's during that time that I saw him take a position that perhaps was not as directed by the Minister of Internal Security then, where he was supposed to have scattered the attempt. But I listened to arguments in Parliament, and he said that even though he had been given a different directive,
yes,
he thought it necessary to allow us to proceed with that select committee. So I would also want to ask that we do not speculate. We allow the police to carry out the investigations. Mm-hmm. And of course the family at this time, it's important to encourage them by being more comforting than throwing in controversies.
Yes.
Again, it's really a time that caught everybody. It was really a scare, because people thought, well, are we still going to have elections? Because he has been able to manage the security docket very, very firmly for the last 2.5 years. But having said that, I think we want to wish the family well. We want to wish them God's guidance at this time, and the whole country at large. On this, and I do that on behalf of the people of Daragwa, because I was in Daragwa yesterday, and every corner I went was what became of General Kaiseri. But this issue of the ballot papers and the court ruling and the rest, I think one of the things I want to do is to commend the IEBC, because they have remained firm on the cause. even as they go to court to find out what public participation means, which is really the question that is in everybody's mind, and especially those who are lawyers, they have continued, or they have already started what they think is public participation by inviting the public to bring their views on this process. They have gone ahead to invite the presidential candidates to the process.
Yes.
And we want to encourage them to continue being on their eyes on the ball, because that is very important. That is what I found very encouraging on the whole of this process. And also the fact that they have seen it necessary to invite parties this morning, presidential candidates or their representatives this morning, so that they can go through this process together. I think it's very commendable. And you can also now see the advantage of having more than one presidential candidate. Because if you had just NASA and Jubilee, you could end up with a stalemate. But the fact that we have others on board, they will help us come up with decisions that I believe will be good for this nation. We are all very suspicious of everything when it comes to elections. And I know the courts will also have this in mind. They would want to clear all the suspicions that surround, and especially the presidential election, so that we don't have people coming later in the year to say that we had said that the ballots were being printed with a person who had a handshake with the president. I think it is important to just clear some of these issues that can be used to delay the country. Any judgment that is made needs to have a public good. And of course, I equally got worried and wondered whether the courts are not going too far, because we are too close. We also need to have the confidence that we have prepared and prepared well. To me, it's the question that came to my mind is whether NASA is really keen on this presidential election. You wonder whether they are prepared for it, or they are looking for every other opportunity to delay it, or to say it is not well organized. And the courts must be careful not to be drawn into those kind of...
Right. We've heard also from the Right Honorable President Uhuru Kenyatta saying that, yes, of course, we know that Uhuru, oh no, not really Uhuru, but Raila Odinga is seeking to sabotage the elections. And of course, looking at this particular ruling also of a court by NASA, as you're saying, could that be holding true? And then again, are we really strapped for time? Are we cutting it too close? As you say, yes, this is just a few months or a few days shy to the general election. Let's hear from Dr. Shemachulo.
Debal, before I make my comment,
sure.
With due respect to my elder, Professor Nyongo, yesterday I met a senior mutual professional friend who said, you know, Professor is a very good debater, but his problem, he looks down upon almost everyone. I think that's a point that I would request my elder brother to take seriously when he participates in panel discussions like this. But having said that, I think Honorable Alice raised the issue of why only presidential. I think the court did make it very clear that, you know, court can only arbitrate on matters that are put before it. The applicants, in this case, only raised the issues of presidential. So I would, they had raised the entire ballot printing process, maybe the court would have said all be cancelled. But also, what I can foresee, and Kenyans being a very community, somebody could go easily to court and then say, why don't we expect to cover the others? But having said that, I want to reiterate the point that with only 30 days, now 28 days to an election, we very badly off for time. We don't have many options. I know some people have been talking about a caretaker government. I can see only two possibilities for that to happen. There can only be a caretaker government if there's a runoff for the 60 days after the election, or in the unlikely event that the president and the deputy resign. And I don't see that happening. So talk of, we don't have many options. And this is why I'm hoping that there will be agreement between the major political actors. Finally, on the issue of public participation, and this is another area where Parliament has failed us. You know, as a layman looking at, it's like media perhaps in this regard was also not in sync with the courts. Because from the media, it looked like there was commercial competition. Some people saying, oh, this guy is fronting for this one, the others are fronting for another one. But that didn't seem to have come out from the court. I don't know whether those factors were presented to the courts also to consider. It looks like courts only looked at the legal aspects. But the only thing that seemed to have come out is public participation. And in this regard, I think Parliament cannot also escape blame. This public participation perhaps needed to have come through some bylaw or legislation saying what does it entail? Because I understand the Senate, for example, has got in its standing orders how this should be done. But that's not enough. The ordinary Kenyans, the public, do not know about those standing orders. It would have been good if Parliament came up with an act or a law specifying what do we mean by public participation. Is it a question of 10, 20, 30, or 100 NGOs appearing before a committee or concerned parties, and we call that public participation? In the circumstances, my feeling is the Constitution says the will of the Kenyan people can be expressed directly or through their elected representatives. Perhaps the option is to recall Parliament to deliberate on this matter to fulfill the threshold of public participation. Because I don't see meeting the 8 presidential candidates today. I do know IEBC has been calling for people to send opinions. And then they have called also a meeting of the public tomorrow. But is that enough public participation? I'm not sure.
All right, let's hear from Professor before we...
Well, so let me have my day in court. First, really, my point is very simple. And the point is that we know the law. We know how the Supreme Court operates. And we know principle of separation of powers that both of you have talked about. I want to make it very, very clear. There's a saying that you never should fear to negotiate, nor should you negotiate in fear. Let me also say that you never should fear to argue, nor should you argue in fear. So I'm not going to argue in fear because a mutual friend whom I don't know told or chose something about me. That is his opinion. That may not be me. Maybe he has his own problems, so you can't use that as a way of telling me of something to do, not at all. Secondly, let us make it very clear. NASA is not going to go to an election with warped rules or warped procedures. It is called a free and fair election. So we're going to do everything possible to make that election free and fair. And that is why we follow procedure, go up to the Supreme Court, to look for that free and fair election and leave it up to the court to make a decision. To say that NASA influenced the Supreme Court to make a decision is actually preposterous. NASA's lawyers were in the Supreme Court with the other lawyers, arguing before the Supreme Court. To say that the Supreme Court then made a decision which was partisan is actually being very condescending to the Supreme Court. In other words, we are passing a vote of no confidence of the Supreme Court judges, which I would be very reluctant to do, because it means that when the Supreme Court makes a decision which you don't like, then you pass a vote of no confidence in them.
Right.
I've just given an example. When the Supreme Court made a decision during the presidential petition, which we didn't like, we say, yes, we don't agree with this decision, but we accept them, because that is what expected as a citizens of Kenya. And we didn't do anything about that, except make that simple statement and move on, as Jubilee wanted. Now, the same people who said we should move on don't want to move on. They are ranting, they are complaining, they are calling the Supreme Court justice all kinds of names. To me, this is juvenile politics. And if I say that, don't say that I'm going to say I'm looking down upon anybody. I'm stating fact which we saw there. To me, as a president and the deputy president should not behave like that in public. Let the president know that he's a head of state. And that title is extremely important. It's enshrined in this constitution. And he should respect and defend and uphold it.
All right. So are we facing maybe...
I'm not aware that this matter was before the Supreme Court.
Just a moment.
Court it was.
Yeah,
just a moment. Let's hear from
Yes,
Jeremiah
it was the
Kioni.
Where is Maraga? Maraga is a Supreme Court judge or what?
All right. Okay.
Maraga made statements outside the judgment.
Yeah, even then, if
which actually was wrong.
All right. Could you come just in the context of the conversation? Because what does it portend then as a country that we are in this particular sort of a quagmire right now with this slap from the judiciary, and we are also strapped for time? Are we facing a constitutional crisis? Will we face a constitutional crisis if at all, you know, everything does not really happen in time and we don't go to the general election on the 8th of August? Let's see from Jeremiah.
Of course, Dibal, and I am not aware that if we have a runoff, Shem seems to suggest that we have a caretaker government. I don't know. I don't think we have
clarify that.
You can clarify, sure. But in the event of a runoff, I don't think we have a caretaker government. We continue the same way. And until after the runoff. If we throw more obstacles to the process, I think we could easily get into a constitutional crisis, because we need to secure the ballots in time also, because we don't also want another court battle saying that the ballots are being brought in late. But and I think it is important to know that the Constitution gives us a definite date, and you cannot vary that date unless you are doing it through a referendum. So if we don't, if the courts are also not careful, they can easily get us into a constitutional crisis. And I think we now, all parties must demonstrate their willingness to get to the election. When you say free and fair, I agree, but it cannot just be free and fair in your own eyes. It is free and fair to all of us. And I think that is why, even as we look at this judgment, I see it's a bench of 3 judges.
It's a high court.
Yes, it's a high court. It's not the Court of Appeal. When you look at this judgment, the only credit that goes, and I believe it is what Professor Nyang is saying, they only dealt with that bit of the printing, which was to commence, I think, on the 15th of July. So 15th of July, yes. So between now or 18th of July, between now and that time, we must allow the IEBC to do everything possible. And I don't think there is any other way beyond calling the presidential candidates and perhaps inviting the public the way they have done. I don't see any other form of public participation. We cannot rely on Parliament to come and pass a law. I mean, we will now be playing the hearts of others. Right. It must be done as directed by the courts, and I hope the courts are able to give their real meaning. What is it that they meant by public participation? Because that is the gray area, so that then we can see whether they are whether it is achievable within the timelines that are there. But I think again, what I want to comment is the IEBC, because immediately, even as they go through they have gone to ask for public participation the way they think how, and calling the presidential candidate to a meeting this morning. I think it is also the minimum that perhaps, or the maximum that can be done in terms of allowing the parties into this process.
All right.
I think if the courts meant, if the courts meant that the tender was wrong because of lack of public participation, so that now the IEBC is proceeding to invite presidential candidates to agree on how to do the tendering, for me that is interference with actually the management and conduct of free and fair elections, because these are people who have an interest in the elections, and they should keep far. And actually the Jubilee presidential candidate, if I were to be asked, and this is my opinion, should not attend that kind of a meeting. Let the IEBC deliver free and fair elections, let them do the tendering, the law guides them how to do it, so that public participation, let them release whatever information they want and they are doing to the public for public consumption. Anybody who wants to raise a question can raise a question that way through them, but to bring the candidates to one table to agree, I think that is now the beginning of storing of the general elections. The Jubilee candidates should actually withdraw that kind of participation. Right. That is my honest view.
Debal, I think I needed to clarify the aspect of caretaker. The law is very clear. The Constitution says that there shall be no vacancy at any point. So the president will remain president until a new president is elected and sworn in.
Yes.
So there will that's for fact. The same goes to Parliament. MPs will be MPs until the new MPs are elected to take over.
Yeah.
That's for fact. But in the interim period of the 60 days, there is a gray area here because the MP's term, although for the MCAs there's been a dispute, does it run up to March next year or something? But for the MPs, their term ends on the 8th of August. So there is a gray area there, depending on how the courts decide to interpret it. Although we would be having the executive, the president, and the government still in place, but without the legislature, you really can't do full functions as you would under normal circumstances. So that's what some people think I've elected to call caretaker. But there's no dispute that the president, President Uhuru, will remain in power until a new president is elected or re-elected into that office. But having said that, I wanted also to take the issue of free and fair elections. You know, I feel happy when parties talk about it. But NASA and ODM in particular should be the last group to push hard for free and fair elections when they didn't have free and fair nominations. You know, it's like that's something I'm sorry to belabor over. The full chain, if you want free and fair elections, it's got to go the full way. This is the same group that opposed diaspora registering to vote and so on. But having also said that, Debal, I remember when IEBC was saying they were going to appeal the earlier High Court ruling. With due respect again to NASA, I think they're right. Going through the court process is the only legitimate way to go through it. But there were the same groups warning, scaring, threatening IEBC that if you go to court, we're going to demonstrate. If you go to appeal. I think we should allow the appeal processes. Even now, if IEBC wanted to appeal, as they have said they're going to appeal, that's the way that it should happen legally. But in this regard, I also agree with IEBC. The two-pronged process. Some people have been saying, why are they on the one hand calling for public participation, presidential candidates, but on the other also proceeding to appeal? I think in the circumstances, whichever of the two that could serve could succeed first, because we need to find a solution to move forward.
Thank you.
But let me say something. I think the choice would be fair. Both sides of the coalition had problems in nomination. NASA had its bit, Jubilee had its bit. Even today, if you read page 17 of The Nation, yes, you will find a title there, Storm Brews over Jubilee Party nominee list. The same storm has brewed in NASA nominee
much worse.
No, don't be value-laden. You seem to be... I mean, if
that's the problem I'm selling, Professor.
No, I'm making a very clear
let him finish. Let him finish. Let him finish.
It would be good to be objective, not subjective.
Or let him finish.
I'm being very objective. I'm saying, as a matter of fact, that there were problems with domination on both sides of the divide. And I've always said, I've been very objective. I've always said, political parties should not carry party nominations at general elections. I've been Secretary General for 10 years. It is unmanageable. You don't have the resources, the technology, and everything else. You are taking a job you cannot do. Elsewhere in Britain, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party do it differently. And so we shouldn't do it. And that's my point. So whether the ODM had their
I'm sorry to butt in, Prof.
nomination, or don't be so passionate about what we know is wrong on both sides of the divide.
All right, I'm sorry to butt in, guys. We need to take a short break right now. No. We need to take a short break right now. We'll come back, of course, with the discussion on the other side of the break. Remember, you're watching This Is the Point here on AM Live. Also, to chime in, you can hit us on Twitter. AM Live NTV is the Twitter handle. AM Live NTV is a profile name on Facebook, and 20505 our SMS portal. We'll take a short break right now. We'll be back in a couple of jiffys, but this morning on the IEBC. But we need now to wind up on this particular conversation. What is the way forward to actually face with this particular dilemma with the courts, with the tender? What is the way forward?
It's very unfortunate that despite trying to push IEBC to go technology the full way, we haven't gone that way. You know, if we adopted for the M-Kura, M-Vote option, the issue of printing ballot would not even be there because it would be all electronic. But that's water under the bridge, but I hope we learn some lessons. That when we come to the next elections, let Kenya, just like we pioneered M-Pesa, let's also pioneer mobile voting so that's all electronic, so to do away with this paper stuff. But having said that, in the current case, of course, Parliament should have, and I think I was just looking at Nation, the back page, where we say, it's not when you talk of public participation, we have neither a legislative framework nor in place to go by. And I agree with IEBC in that regard. And that's an indictment on Parliament, not to have come up with those policies, but also in this regard, I think there is the provision in law, I think what the lawyers call jurisprudence. Maybe IEBC needs to request the courts, the judiciary, when Parliament fails to give legislation, the judiciary can also make law. So perhaps that could give guidance on what do we mean by public participation, so that there is a clear guideline. But in this particular case, and with a light touch, and why I'm advocating for technology, I noticed there also on the media talk of M-Pesa having issues with ID cards. I'm wondering, why can't M-Pesa just go the full way? There are mobile money companies in this country that use biometric to ensure that the real person is either withdrawing money or depositing. Why are we still talking of photos while we could do better? But so my thinking moving forward beyond this election is technology. But for the current one, I wanted to disagree with my sister slightly. And again, looking at the back of it, the Secretary General of Jubilee, when he was advising the candidate not to appear, the Jubilee Secretary General said they will comply, as was a request asked by IEBC. Yes. I think the way to go for now, we're in a stage where there must be restraint on the part of all actors. Just for this is the time we see real statesmen and women of this country to move us forward.
All right, let's see.
I think it will be important for just a little bit different from Mheshimiwa Alice. I think it will be important for the Jubilee team to have a representation in the meeting this morning. For the reason that I think what the courts were also trying to do is to deal with any kind of suspicion. And as another one of the panelists in the past on this platform asked is, NASA seems to have gone to court on all aspects of the electoral process, and especially on the presidential elections coming. You hope that when the results are announced, we will have very little to go to court for, because we have been in court on every other aspect on this process. But I think it is important for all parties to appear this morning. It is good that IEBC has given that two-pronged approach, get the public to send in whatever views they have, and have this meeting in the morning. But I think it's also telling that at the very first instance when the NASA went to court, a stay was not given by the court to the printing of the ballots, which allowed IEBC to continue doing, and I'm sure that is why they were able to print all the other ballots, making it safe for the country that and certain that the elections will be held on the 8th. And looking at the timelines, we still can be able to deal with this issue today and tomorrow and still proceed with the printing, because even the company that has already printed the other ballots was not barred from printing the presidential ballot if the process is started, and again given that note by all the other parties. But I think the involvement of the parties is crucial this morning. It is part of, I don't know how you get involved in procurement, public participation in procurement, other than inviting many other tenders. But if public participation is getting the presidential candidates to come and say, okay, we now understand the process, carry on, I think that is useful, and we should encourage all parties to get there. And the fact that we have other presidential candidates, it makes it possible for them to get to a decision. When you have two, you can end up with a stalemate. But when you have more than two, that will be useful. It is possible to agree. I remember when we were with Musalia Mudavadi, we had these sittings. People go and agree. It is out here that we carry a stone face. But when you sit in a meeting, you are able to raise up to the voice of reason.
All right.
Debar, you know, the two are saying they disagree with me. Actually, I'm quite okay.
No, I
mean, they have different. They have a different opinion.
Sure.
I'm still stuck with my opinion, and I think it. And I'm saying here, for me, what the IEBC now will be doing these 2 days is actually an illegality, and the court, even if it would want to prescribe to come up with a decision that helps the enactment of the law.
How will it be an illegality?
Then there is no, because you know, Shem has repeated here twice that there is no policy, there is no guideline, there is no law that says how then that public participation should be done. So to imagine that that means to bring the candidates on the table to decide on procurement, and they are participants and interested parties in these elections, what I'm saying, I think now that is going too far into a very critical material for elections.
No, we need to be clear that when we say that it's an illegality, yet it is actually
it's
predicated in the law. It is the execution of the public participation which is not clarified in the Constitution. No, we need to be very clear.
Can I finish?
We need to be clear that it is a clarification on how that particular public participation it is expected to be executed from the law. So you cannot just give a blanket statement that this is illegality.
You see, the public participation, for example, that Parliament has done is to invite people through memoranda. But now here you are saying, I'm a candidate and I'm invited to come and decide on how the ballot and who should be printed and who will be given that ballot. I mean, those issues.
So is this an issue of lacuna that we have in the law? That yes. What is it?
Those issues will arise because you remember, even the question of this person who is said to have gone to State House and whatever, this is very dangerous at this particular time. What if any of them now decides to use this particular activity to say, I'm still not satisfied, it's not okay, and therefore, and because
the whole process.
You have brought in yourself into this, then to exit becomes very
okay. Let's hear from Jeremiah Kioni, then we'll come to you.
That is why the ballot, it is important to. It is good that we have more than 2 presidential candidates. Whatever the other team commands in terms of percentage, it doesn't matter. They are presidential candidates, and when you have more than 2, you will certainly arrive at the decision. So if you have a dissenting position, you can as well record it. We have had a lot of suspicion in this country. You always suspect the other one is trying to rig you out. And for purposes of eliminating that suspicion, it is important that these parties are called and informed of what is happening. It's not for them to decide, but they are informed of what is happening so that the suspicion that a handshake in State House guarantees the other one a win is dealt with. And more so in the public court. The public want to, some of these things that have been raised, they were raised by the leaders to sway the public opinion.
Yes.
And we need to deal with this going to the date of election. And I think what IEBC is doing is a good thing. Then come, let us tell you how we are doing it. Tell us where you think a handshake creates some biasness in the whole of this process. So I want to again say that it is good to have this, even if there is a lacuna in the law. You cannot wait, you cannot sit back and wait for Parliament to come and enact the law. We need to have elections by the 8th. You must do something. And what IEBC is doing, and they are even asking the court to give their own interpretation within the provisions that now exist, I think is the proper thing to do.
All right,
certainly, we must avoid using the judiciary to ruin the process. But we also need to help the process, even as we debate.
Can I say something? Because all of you have spoken. Give me time to speak.
I hope your voice will be louder.
Yeah.
That's my only problem.
He's not audible.
No, even when I listen to him at home, I get a problem. Okay. I keep adjusting the volume.
Follow Jeremiah. No, give me time to speak. First, I think it is good that the IBC, I agree with Jeremiah, has moved ahead and said, look, you wanted us to do public participation, whatever it is, we have started. Okay? Then the IBC has done a good thing. Invite the principals. Because if there's any level of public participation which is needed, it is from the principals, all the presidential candidates. Let them come, let us tell them, look, gentlemen, this was the decision by the High Court. These were the arguments that were put before the High Court, and this is how we decided. We are now directed by the High Court to undertake this process. What we are proposing about undertaking the process is the following. 1, 2, 3, 4. What is your input? They will say. Then from that meeting will come a roadmap towards making sure that we print ballot papers for the presidential candidate in time. My take is this, and I've contested about 5 elections in this country. I think there are 5.
Yes.
When we, under the Moi regime, Moi used to dissolve parliament a month or so before the elections, if I remember well. There was very little time. Campaigns were for 3 weeks. It was a month or a month and a half.
21 days.
21 years. And yet all the papers were printed within that time, and we went to elections. So to me, time is not really a problem, because you have an experience of printing ballot papers, not just presidential, but others, within a matter of 21 days.
And those papers were printed in the country?
I don't care where they were printed, but they were printed. Because at that meeting today, these principles, when the IEBC has put the problems before them, the IEBC will say, okay, constitutionally the elections are to be held on the 8th of August. We can't change that. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what we're proposing. In order to meet the 8th of August, these ballot papers must be printed by this date. In order to print it by this date, this thing called public participation must be carried out in this way. And I think, as Jeremiah says, when you put it like that, people are very reasonable. I remember Jeremiah, I don't know whether they were in the IPPG. When we convened the IPPG, some people posted very seriously. But we say, look, we are between the devil and the deep blue sea. We better meet and discuss reasonable and practical ways of getting out of this crisis. And in the end, by the way, the IPPG is now being quoted historically as a sane move that helped this country move forward and finally create an enabling environment for starting the process towards the Constitution of 2010. At that point in time, obviously, it was very, very controversial. I myself found it very difficult to make a decision between the IPPG and no reform, no election. Okay, but I said, look, it looks as if we are in a paralysis. The opposition is not strong enough to dislodge the government. The government is too weak to stay in power without consulting the opposition. Let us do something which is in the national interest. At this point in time, I think that the discussion being held today between among the principals is in the national interest, because you cannot undo the High Court ruling. You cannot go back and say the High Court made a decision without knowing those public participants. Is water under the bridge. If the elections are be held on the 8th of August, that meeting is important. The IEBC must agree with the principles what public participation means, agree when ballot papers are being printed, because contrary to the popular thing being said by the other side, NASA has never said, is not interested in postponing the election, nor are we interested in having a coalition government with Jubilee, because it has failed and it should go home as a government, period.
So that is outright, that moving forward, there will never be a coalition between NASA and Jubilee. They will. This is according to your own opinion.
My opinion is that we are going to win the elections. We want the election to be on the 8th of August, but we want these things to be clarified so that we have a free and fair elections.
Okay,
but
so
just a moment.
Let's have Shem, then we come to, because he had a rebuttal.
The ball, there is what
or a clarification.
The lawyers called, and I'm not one, but we have lawyers, I understand, in the room.
Not understanding.
Don't make law mysterious.
The Parliament
makes laws. So
we have legislatures.
I've been making laws for 20 years, and I studied law, by the way.
Well, making law and being a lawyer, but that's not an issue.
Okay, I just went to Kenya Law School because I didn't want to do law as a practice.
We have lawmakers in the house.
But I know what it is.
You notice always.
Let's just proceed.
My point is, there is what's called due diligence.
There are lawyers in the room.
Due diligence in law.
There are lawyers, okay. Honorable Kioni.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, and I also have LLD in law.
So what's the problem?
But that's honorary. So
sitting in between them.
The point I wanted to make is due diligence in law. And in this regard, I think most of us, perhaps all of us, are agreed what IEBC is doing now is the right thing. The only problem is I wish they had done this then when they should have called public participation and so on and so forth. But having said that, you know, my take is that IEBC is trying to, the courts were concerned about what's the minimum threshold that they would allow for public participation. And this is why I would want to believe that IEBC is saying, first, let's call the principals, the presidential candidates. Let's also seek the public opinion within the limited time that we have. And let's also appeal in court, because that's also provided for in our law. So I think that aspect of the minimum threshold and due diligence is important. And that's why, again, I reiterate the point that yes, let's put the national interest first, all of us, have restraint. But I wanted also to pinpoint that while this happened in the IPPG before perhaps the rest of us, other than Professor Nyong'o was in Parliament, IPPG was ahead of our time. But the circumstances, while it would work in 97 and it could work in 2007, 10 years later, when there was the Nusumkati government, we must recognize that then Parliament was able to amend the Constitution. But with the 2010 Constitution, the situation is different because it's got to go to a referendum. This is a protected section. But that does not take away the fact that it's a time that we must come together as a country and look at the bigger picture rather than partisan interests.
Sorry, let's say from
NASA must demonstrate that they are ready for
let's say from Alice.
There are just too many hands cooking this broth. And therefore, it is likely, and that's my greatest fear and concern, that all these people, because they are interested, debar. And you know, when the court was giving this judgment, for example, because we must look at it and make some analysis ourselves, they should have then have said within that, because they must have arrived at it after some arguments, legal arguments, then they should have said the concern was 1, 2, 3, so that even as they are directing that public participation, then there would be some guidelines. So what I'm saying is, I see a very precarious situation here, putting people who are now on edge and are very suspicious. It is true. You know, like he has just said that the Jubilee government has failed. It must now be ready to go home. Yeah. Are they ready to go home when we win? And because we are winning, are they ready to go home?
Okay.
We're not going anywhere. I mean, are they going to stay home and stay peacefully?
All right, winning fantastic. Winning notwithstanding, we need to establish, especially for the viewer who don't really understand the role of what is the rhyme and reason for really having this public participation in the first place. Why are we having this public participation? What will be the input of the public? 10,
yes. Public participation is one of the values,
national values,
and principles that we put in all activities that involve public good and public interest. And therefore, for me, the public interest in this particular case is that players who are interested parties should stay away. So participation is a requirement under the Constitution. And that's where we were saying,
participation to do what? Is it just a rigmarole, an exercise that we have a public, the civil society, they're there? What do they do?
Even in making budgets, even in the constituencies, most of those things that will affect the public is supposed to be given information. The public is supposed to raise questions. The public is supposed to be asked.
Of which the government has, especially the county governments, that have failed to do that. Because a lot of these tenders that we've never been asked as a public to participate in this particular tender.
And I think we need to recall where we are coming from. And I have said this before, is that we did things so badly as leaders, as people entrusted with offices, that the public no longer have confidence when you do things behind doors. One of the reasons why there was this debate, and I was part of this, people saying we bring it to the public, is that so that we win the confidence of the public. They may not come to to have an input in the process, but you're able to demonstrate to them what it is that you are doing, and it's above board. And I think this is what IEBC is trying to do. Come see what we have done. It is still, the public is involved in it. Even if they are not having an input in it, they are winning the confidence of those who are suspicious. And I believe the public participation, yes, there is a participating where you now bring in documents and say what you think, but there is also participation in being part of what is being informed of what is being done, not through the media, but really being demonstrated to you. Debara, remember, all those elections that have been contested by Anyang'o in the past, a lot of the reasons why people went to court is suspicion. We were not there when the ballots were printed. Who is this who printed the ballot? We don't even know how you are relaying results. All this is suspicion. We want to see, we no longer believe people when they do things behind closed doors. From that principle, I think it is important to allow IEBC to do what they are doing. Beyond that level of participation, I don't see what else the IEBC can do.
I think I like Jeremiah Kioni's argument. Quite honestly, look, in procurement, if you're a government body trying to procure this cap, and you realize that you don't have a system in that particular department or procuring this cap, you can use the system in another government body, okay, to do the same. That's allowed in procurement. Likewise, in things like public participation, since it is said in Article 10, 10.2, the national values and principles of governance include patriotism, national unity, sharing and evolution of power, the rule of law, democracy, and the participation of the people. Of all these national values, by the way, sharing and evolution of power is the one most inscribed in law. Patriotism, national unity, the rule of law is also inscribed in law. Democracy is also through parliament and all that. But if you look at patriotism, national unity, and participation of the people, they are left as principles for which certain bodies can legislate. For example, national unity, the body called National Cohesion and Integration Cohesion, Kaparo's body, is supposed to define that. And the act establishing that body is supposed to tell us what national cohesion, national unity should be, okay? Now, when it comes to participation, Parliament, fortunately, has established procedures which they call how to bring the public to participate. If the IEBC doesn't have a procedure, they can easily borrow Parliament because government bodies are allowed to use each other's instruments to participate. So I really think that what the IEBC is doing today by calling the presidential candidate and others may easily, they can easily take the formats of Parliament to do that if there's no general guiding participation. In other words, you have to understand how government functions. Government really doesn't want to leave things in a vacuum. When a vacuum exists, they look for something to fill it, which is within the law. So I think that let us not extend this thing too far. I think what the IEBC is doing, they can borrow procedures from Parliament, have a public participation within the time required, and we ourselves may be a hindrance to hold the elections in time if we begin bringing too many requests at this point in time. At this point in time, Kenyans want to see, yes, the High Court made a decision, yes, the politicians have criticized the decision, but in the final analysis, there's a body given the responsibility for delivering this election, the Independent and Electoral Boundaries Commission.
All right.
And it has taken an action. Let us give it time. Let us see whether it works or not. And I think I agree with Jeremiah. Whatever you are busy giving, sir, you can go there to participate and tell IEBC, in my opinions, lastly, Swahome, this is what you should do.
But I think Professor must be knowing what NASA want or meant when they were talking about public participation. I think he should be now saying, we want 1, 2, 3.
That's what
because
I'm saying.
That's the question you are belaboring, the answer.
Yes.
Yeah.
I told you
and we are saying already enough public participation has been done before.
No, I told you very clearly. It is upon you to do your homework. Go and pick up, just hold on. Go and pick up the arguments in the High Court from both parties. See whether the issue of public participation was argued before the High Court adequately, and whether the High Court, after listening to those arguments, made a decision which was just. You will find out the arguments of the NASA lawyers and your lawyers, and you will find out that in the final analysis, the judges then made a decision that, look, public participation was not undertaken for A, B, C. It's not for a young woman to spoon feed you with that.
Not to spoon feed. You are here. You are a major. You are a major actor. You know, Professor. I think in this diaspora gentleman was right. I think it is important to respect other people's
I'm respecting you,
because you are saying you are not doing homework. We are here to address the public. You are not addressing me.
All right, fantastic. Thank you.
I just raised a very important point. I said this question has been argued in court, yes, but the people behind this, the strategic thinkers, are part of. He's here. He should be telling the public, we are going to ask for 1, 2, 3 when we go to IEBC. That doesn't mean that I'm asking him to do my homework.
Okay, thank you. We want to hear what also Kenyans are saying. Just give me a moment. Just a moment.
That's what I said.
Yes.
I said very clearly that, and by the way, this is, I give it to you for free. If I'm in that delegation today going to see the IEBC, I will say, By the way, what we meant by public participation is exactly what Parliament is doing. It's not rocket science. If you don't have you as IEBC, as an entity of government, your own format for public participation, borrow it from Parliament, here it is. So if you have that, then indeed you have started a process of public participation. And I'm quite sure that the IEBC, having had their lawyers in court, listen to those arguments and have started operationalizing. Okay. That's all I'm saying.
All right, thank you. Allow me to just also give our viewers a moment also to have their say as well. Usha, she's standing by. Let's hear from Usha what the rush of tweets are saying.
Right, 20 minutes to the top of the hour, and your comments are flowing in. In the interest of time, I'll just get straight to it. We have, well, that seems to have disappeared. We have Ruot who, sorry, my touch is acting up. Yes, we have Ruot who says, Baba has made such statements against, about every institution, including the judiciary, and Nyong'o has been conveniently silent. We also have, John who says, Ruot said Baba has made such statements against every institution, including the judiciary, and Nyong'o has been conveniently silent. Would you like the right of reply on that one? Because of course there have been statements, even in as far as the IEBC itself, there has been previously NASA feeling like the IEBC was aligned more towards the government side.
You want to respond, Professor?
Well, I don't think it's correct that have been
silent.
Conveniently silent. What statement did Baba make? I mean, be precise. Don't make a general statement and then leave it upon me to decipher what you are talking about.
I think it means they have made every a warpath on every other statement. They have been on a warpath against all institutions of public.
Okay, already.
So they should leave us alone this particular time.
Statements like those are what I called social intimidation. You make such a broad statement. You have social intimidation.
They have brought stones. They have gone to reject. They have rejected IEBC.
Just a moment.
No, it is telling that Prof knows who Baba is.
Yeah.
You could actually tell us what Baba has said.
No, that is not my Baba. You know, my Baba is known. Is the head of state.
Okay,
No, he's not.
Let's
my
go back
Baba.
to Usha. Usha.
He's not my Baba.
Right, so Ruot. Right, so Ruot, maybe if you could tweet us again and specify which specific incident you're talking about, and Professor will be happy to answer you. We also have John Gidanga who says, the touch screen seems to be acting up today. Right, we'll just go to Summit, who says, it's rather sad that the president and his team are attacking the judiciary because of a ruling not in their favor. He is the one who appointed the CJ. We also have Mushima, who says, those who argue about time for printing ballots should tell us what if a runoff ensued? How many days would the IEBC have to prepare? We also have Njihia, who says there's no difference between Raila and Uhuru, NASA and Jubilee. The only difference is that one is in power and the other is not. We have Samuel, who says all presidential candidates must have equal playing ground, and that can only be achieved and ensured through the judiciary and the IEBC. We have John Gidanga, who says IEBC should now move with speed to appropriate the election process within the short time left. Kenya's peace relies on Chebukati. We also have Simon, who says NASA has been attacking every institution, even the same IEBC that they ordered for a change of commissioners. Beg your pardon. What does NASA want? We also have Benna, who says courts are influenced by brilliant legal arguments, so NASA influenced through James Orengo. And finally, we have FDR, who says, let's be honest, it's dirty politics messing up the judiciary. If politicians on both sides had a little integrity, we would be fine. So that is, of course, all the comments that I could manage to read, but the conversation does go on online, AM Live and TV. That is how you can get us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. Dibal.
Many thanks indeed, Usha. Yeah, with the rush of tweets there, many of them, of course, also this conversation will continue off air as well. Make sure also you chime in on our Twitter handle, AM Live NTV. We continue with the discussion here, and let's hear from Shemucho very briefly.
Debal, I begin by complimenting the contributors. I think they're quite to point. Most of those contributions are very objective, in my view, and progressive, so to speak. When we talk of the public participation in Article 10, we must tie it also with the other national values and principles. Of particular importance here is transparency, okay, and accountability. I think the transparency aspect is perhaps what may have been lacking when the previous tenders were done. But I think we all recognize, and I really don't know why we are splitting hairs on this matter. The printing of presidential votes is meant to start on 18th. So we still, the ballots is meant to happen on 18th. So we still have a little over 1 week for that to have happened. So within that 1 week, I'm sure a solution can be found. Because even our procurement regulations do provide for single sourcing, as long as certain conditions are met. In terms of borrowing from Parliament, one thing with Kenyans, we never accept when we have made mistakes. Parliamentarians here don't want to accept, yes, this was an oversight, we should have, but I also appreciate there are many things they needed to legislate on. So, but that's a fact that there was failure on part of either the AG to initiate a process to come up with policies and law for public participation. But having said that, it's good that there are some I would want to believe there are standing orders in Parliament that specify that within this time you do advertise in the press, say people give their views and so on and so forth. But the timelines have got now to be fast-tracked so that even if all that is got to happen, that it happens within these remaining 7 days. What we are doing even now, in my view, is part of public participation. So I would expect that whoever is going to come up with that policy or legislation in terms of public participation, part of it is already happening. And finally, I just wanted to say again, if there is that goodwill and we all calm down the tempo, this is not the time for grandstanding. We can get a solution. It's possible.
Maybe also the question that we should ask ourselves is that because Honorable Jeremiah Kioni, you say that of course this is a good gesture coming from IEBC, also proffering their hands to the presidential candidates and the entire public to participate on this. But was IEBC shoehorned by, you know, the judiciary to do this in the first place with the public participation? Because we don't see if it was really out of their own volition that yes, they were going back to the public for them to participate. They were going full steam ahead with this particular exercise until the court intervened.
I don't think it's until the court intervened. It's until, you know, it's NASA wants to micromanage this process. Perhaps...
no, but of course now NASA came with this issue of participation and now the court has intervened. That's my question. So were they now leaving out the public? As we were heading towards the general election with this particular exercise without the participation. So this is it a good gesture coming from them, or this is a shoehorning from a court?
I think one of the things that we must, and out of the tweets that came, the courts must ensure that they are not seen to be micromanaging the process, because you have seen one of the participants there said that you can only get a fair process through the judiciary and IEBC, that kind of thing. We need, the court must demonstrate that they are not micromanaging these institutions. It's very important. I don't know whether what IEBC is doing, in my opinion, they should have done it before. They should not have waited for the courts to direct them to do it. But the fact that even the public participation that was required of them is unclear by the courts, it actually tells you that there is still a process that needs to evolve. What is really this public participation? So I really don't want to apportion blame on this. I think it is just fair to pick it and allow us to move on with it. You see, because when politicians speak to this, you can now see the guys on Twitter saying that the president appointed the CJ and the rest. Again, remember the process of appointing as Chief Justice. It's not a personal thing, it's done through institutions. And it is this confidence buying that we must do to Kenya so that when a decision is arrived at, it's not personalized. But on the same breath, it will be important to get it very clear from NASA that they are willing to have these elections on the 8th of August. I tell you, and it's not from nowhere, when I heard last night that the former Prime Minister was taken ill or just for a checkup last night, what hit me is that this guy is really ready for these elections, or is this another way of And I want to apologize for that, but it's the feeling that comes to Kenyans, and we need to get reassured every other time and Prof is here. He should take the opportunity to assure Kenyans that they are ready for these elections on the 8th, so that it's not seen like this process. One is looking for every other opportunity to try and see why is it that we should not have an elections and an election heading to.
Let me.
And of course, that more, and especially when you are not certain that you are on a winning platform.
Let me make it very clear, once and for all doubting Thomases. We are more than ready for the 8th of August election. That's why I'm campaigning to be governor of Kisumu.
And the outcome.
And that's on the outcome, of course. And that's why Raila Amolo Odinga and his team are campaigning all over the place, and Uhuru Kenyatta are following them wherever they go. So we are very ready. But Debal,
yes,
when you are pointing out the important items in the news, I think we should also point out some very good developments in the scientific world.
Yes.
On page 3 of the Standard.
Okay, let me
scroll. Very important news.
Yes.
Let me just finish. Sorry.
The Standard.
Oh, page 3 of the Standard.
Yes.
There's a very important news. It was no health. Chemotherapy may spread cancer, caution scientists. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I saw it.
I think that's very important, more than even politics. Chemotherapy may spread cancer, caution scientists. That is in the Standard. Then in the Nation, page 12. In the Nation, page 12, there's a news item there. Nation, page 12.
Yes.
Can you get it?
Yeah. In a moment, just give me a moment to scroll over to page 12.
Page 12, yeah.
Yes.
Get it.
Page 12, there you go. Oh, just a moment.
Nation. Yeah. Okay. Down there. No, go down. Relief. Yeah. Relief as world-class cancer center.
Set up in Eldoret. Yes.
Actually, I initiated this cancer center when I was Minister for Medical Services.
Yes.
And broke the ground at Eldoret. I'm really glad that it has come to be. You understand, this kind of center takes a very long time to establish. Because one linear accelerator costs about $1 billion shillings. And the linear accelerator itself is not enough. You have to train scientists to use it, medical physicists, cancer nurses, and so on. And I'm glad that this process has been carried out with the help of partners, donor partners, and so on, and the International Atomic Energy Commission, to make sure that we have now got a world-class cancer center in Eldoret. Let me tell you, this center is going to be as good as the centers you find in places like Texas over time. Now, this one on page 3 is also very important. Chemotherapy may spread cancer. It relates to this one, because this one relates to radiotherapy treatment for cancer. This one relates to chemotherapy treatment for cancer. Now, people have relied on chemotherapy for a very long time. Notwithstanding that scientists in the States, in fact, a huge book was written not too long ago, The Emperor of All Maladies, by a scientist from Harvard. A thick book, very good, you should read it. In that book, he shows that research over time had shown that chemotherapy was very dangerous. Now, of course, chemotherapy was the only thing available for a long time for the treatment of cancer. Research on radiotherapy was started much later. But I'm glad that Kenya is moving towards radiotherapy, but also being cautious about the dangers of chemotherapy. And that in between, there's something called herbal medicine. And KEMRI, which is our research institution here in Kenya, recently, I think it was not too long ago, came up with the news that they have discovered 67 plant species in Kenya.
The equity is in the constitution. One of the values, giving people equal.
Yes, but I'm just saying this because I think this is important.
I think it is important.
Very, very important. Really. I mean, to me, it's very important that what was happening in KEMRI with having this discovery of so many plant species from which we can get cancer treatment from herbal medicine should be in as much focus as what we're seeing here today. So I hope next time when you're going through the press, please try and point out some of the developments.
I agree with you.
This was important, but I think the bigger picture is the science, technology, innovation aspect.
As we're winding up, that was his closing statement. We stop for time. Also be giving your closing statement.
Same amount of time, I hope. I think I took time to go through the NASA and Jubilee manifestos that were launched. Two major things I was looking for. One is what Professor Nyang is talking about, science, STI, science, technology, and innovation, although Professor is an expert in almost everything. But when it comes to that area, I think I'm an authority too. I was looking for two things. I was looking for diaspora, and I was looking for STI. Incidentally, there's no single word diaspora in NASA manifesto, which is not surprising. Jubilee has got something light about it. But we can forgive because Jubilee has not been in the open opposing diaspora registration. So STI and diaspora are two major game changers for this country. I enjoyed reading an article over the weekend by the the ambassador of Ireland in Kenya, was saying the main solution to Kenya is STI. Now, there was a point that Honorable Kioni was also saying. I do know, and I think NASA has been right to bring these issues to court. But what I keep asking myself as a former legislator, these many things, when we go to streets, when we go to courts, we have members of parliament. Why were we not hearing many of such? Recognizing I've been in opposition MP, we were very few, but there were still major efforts in parliament to come with legislation. Finally, I want to compliment NASA leadership for having gone to Kiambu.
Yes.
And making foray into Central.
Right,
and I think Jubilee needs also to do the same. My very last one.
All right. Okay, I'm stuck for time, actually, my director. Okay. She's on my case. Let's give it to Alice, 30 seconds, and Jeremiah Kioni.
I think I am reflecting on what the public participation question that you have followed, Dibal, yes. And the comments that are coming in through the public, through the media here in terms of feedback is part of public participation to this debate. And they don't seem to speak very well about the judiciary, and I think the judiciary needs to note that kind of reaction from the public. Then secondly, the NASA may have gone to Kiambu, but Jubilee has been to Coast, which has been a stronghold of the NASA. We are in Eastern Province, the Lower Eastern Province.
Thank you.
We are in Western Province, so we actually are everywhere. I want to remind my brother. Yeah, I think the only question is that we have not gone to his home village. We will be
all right, Jeremiah Kioni, 30 seconds, sir.
The difference between Jubilee and NASA is like day and night. There was that thing. The other thing is that I think following on General Kaiseli's demise, you can see there were two politicians who had said that he was in the process of, they had claimed he was about to eliminate them. Careless statements like those can be very costly. You see what happened. And I think finally is that maybe when there is time, Professor may want to clarify something that was said by Retimaro yesterday or the day before, where he was saying that General Kaiseli is the one who stopped Professor from getting them to sign on a cessational document.
Oh, okay, I think those are very contentious issues because he's tough for time, he won't get time to rebut, so I won't want us to really delve deeper.
But
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I saw it on air, and
it's one of me, and I don't know about it. I don't know what this guy is talking about. I mean, it would be crazy for me. Sensation going where?
Right, thank you.
I mean, it's just crazy.
Thank you. Let's leave it at that.
Yes.
That we are tough for time.
When we were in...
right, thank you. We
don't have to allow the Jubilee team to go to Kisumu and campaign in that peaceful environment. It will be very important for this country.
I'm glad you say that, because there's a rumor, and I heard it from the special branch, that DP Ruto is going to Kisumu. Some people have made some very funny arrangement. They're not from Kisumu, by the way, but they're using guys in Kisumu. When DP goes there, he'll be stoned so that we can be stopped from campaigning the Rift Valley. I mean, those kind of schemes, to me, I was told yesterday.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. No. We need to wind up.
Warning our people against that kind of manipulation by very, very evil politicians.
Thank you. All right, we'll stop. Thank you very much for your valid company. We really appreciate also your participation on this conversation. Thank you. You've been watching This Is the Point.